Abstract. Mirabella, Mira, Storm, a sharp-tongued waitress with a talent for balancing trays and dodging trouble, discovers she is the sole heiress to the eccentric galactic tycoon Cornelius Van Der Blesk. But the fortune comes with a catch. She must marry one of 12 perfect suitors chosen by an algorithm. Unwilling to trade her freedom for a golden cage, Mira teams up with her debt-ridden stepbrother and a ruthless lawyer to exploit a loophole in the rules. She enters the competition as the 13th candidate to marry her own independence. From death races on rusted junk worlds to riots on religious colony planets, Mira must survive the trials, the sabotage, and the irritatingly rugged charm of Alex Wrench, a mechanic who seems determined to save her life while insulting her driving. The reading of the last will and testament of Cornelius Van Der Blesk did not take place in a somber law office, but rather in the solarium of the Seven Suns, a room so obscenely gilded it made Mira's eyes water. Mirabella, Mira, Storm sat on the edge of a Louis XIV hoverchair, clutching her handbag as if it contained state secrets rather than a stick of gum and a half-charged datapad. She was surrounded by the deceased's true family, 37 Persian cats, each wearing a collar worth more than Mira's entire apartment building. They watched her with unblinking, judgmental eyes, much like the holographic projection of Cornelius Van Der Blesk that shimmered into existence above the mahogany desk. If you are watching this, the hologram boomed, stroking a holographic cat, it means I have shuffled off this mortal coil and ascended to the great boardroom in the sky. To my estranged daughter, Mirabella, I leave everything. My empire, my credits, my collection of vintage nebulas. Mira's jaw dropped. She looked around the room, waiting for a punchline. She was a waitress at the Greasy Spoon on a backwater station. Her most valuable possession was a comfortable pair of shoes. However, Cornelius shouted, making two real cats hiss. I was a lonely man. I do not wish loneliness upon my blood. Therefore, the inheritance is conditional. Billions of credits will transfer to Mirabella only upon her marriage to one of the 12 suitors I have meticulously selected via the Grumotron 3000 algorithm. The wedding must occur within 30 days of the final trial. Mira let out a snort that echoed in the silent hall. You have got to be kidding me. The trials, Cornelius continued, oblivious to her disdain, will prove their worth. May the best man win my daughter and my money. End transmission. The hologram fizzled out. The lawyer, a reptilian humanoid named Mr. Scales, pushed a contract across the desk. Sign here to accept the terms, Miss Storm. Mira stood up, smoothing down her faded uniform. Keep the money. And the cats. I'm not marrying some algorithm-chosen stranger for a pile of credits. I value my freedom. Thank you very much. She turned on her heel and marched out, feeling incredibly proud of her moral fortitude. That pride lasted exactly 45 minutes, until she reached the waiting area of the spaceport where her stepbrother, Rick, was pacing a hole in the floor. Rick looked like a golden retriever who had been kicked through an asteroid field. His jacket was torn, and he had a fresh bruise blooming on his cheek. When Mira told him she had refused the money, Rick didn't just cry. He dissolved. Mira, please, he sobbed, grabbing her hands. You don't understand. I owe money. A lot of money. To Grimza. The name dropped the temperature in the terminal by 10 degrees. Grimza wasn't just a loan shark. He was a financial predator who allegedly collected debts by repossessing vital organs. Rick, Mira hissed. How much? Enough that he threatened to turn us both into decorative nutrient paste, Rick wailed. If you don't take the inheritance, he'll find us. He'll find Mom. Mira, we need those billions. Mira looked at her brother's terrified face, then at the holographic advertisement for a burger joint on the wall, and finally at her own reflection in the glass. She saw a tired waitress with messy hair and a stubborn chin. She couldn't let Rick die. But she also couldn't marry a stranger. I need a lawyer, Mira said, her voice grim. Not one of those corporate lizards. I need Aunt Sarah. Aunt Sarah was technically not their aunt, nor was she currently a practicing lawyer due to a misunderstanding involving a judge and a ferret, but she was the sharpest legal mind in the sector. They found her in a dive bar, winning a game of holographic poker. Sarah listened to the predicament, lit a slim cigarillo, and read the 40-page contract Mr. Scales had provided. She hummed, she hawed, and then a shark-like grin spread across her face. "Here it is," Sarah said, tapping paragraph 4, subsection C. "The winner takes all clause. It says the inheritance is awarded to the couple formed by Mirabella and the winning candidate. It defines a candidate as any individual officially registered in the Galactic Bridal Games who completes all tasks." "So?" Mira asked. "So?" Sarah blew a smoke ring. "Nowhere does it say the candidate has to be a man, or that the candidate cannot be the bride herself. The rules state the heir must marry the winner. If you enter the games, Mira, and you win the games, you effectively win the right to marry yourself. Or rather, you win the right to choose your own destiny, fulfilling the condition of the victor claiming the prize." "I can marry my independence," Mira realized, a slow smile forming. "I can be the 13th suitor." The opening ceremony took place on the resort planet Glemuria, a world entirely covered in pink sand, diamond dust oceans, and paparazzi. The 12 official suitors were lined up on a stage that floated above a crowd of screaming fans. They were specimens of physical perfection, or at least expensive genetic engineering. There was Count Etienne, a man so pompous he refused to breathe the same air as the commoners, utilizing a personal oxygen filter. There was Sir Galahad of the Neonites, wearing power armor polished to a mirror sheen. There was Jean-Paul, a model whose smile was so white it was legally classified as a navigational hazard. And then there was candidate number 13. When the announcer called her name, the crowd went silent. Mira walked out wearing a flight suit she'd bought at a surplus store, looking like a grease stain on a silk sheet. The 12 men stared at her. Count Etienne raised a monocle. "Is this the catering staff?" "I'm your competition, boys," Mira said into the microphone, her voice booming across the plaza. "And I plan to kick your collective posteriors." Most of the men laughed, but one didn't. Standing at the end of the line was candidate 12, Alex Wrench. He didn't look like a prince or a model. He looked like he had just crawled out from under an engine block. He wore oil-stained coveralls, had a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes that looked perpetually annoyed. "You're making a mistake, princess," Alex grunted as Mira took her place beside him. "This isn't a game for amateurs." "Good thing I'm a professional survivor," Mira shot back. "And don't call me princess. It's Mira. Why are you even here? You look like you hate this." "I need the money," Alex said shortly, crossing his muscular arms. "My colony needs filters. We're suffocating. I'm not here for romance, and I'm certainly not here to babysit." "Good," Mira snapped. "Because I don't need a babysitter. I need a drink." The first trial was held on the complete opposite of Glemuria, the planet Rusty Bolt. It was a graveyard of spaceships, a world of orange dust and jagged metal spires. The challenge, a death race through the Scrapyard Canyon. The vehicles, ancient anti-gravity motorcycles salvaged from the trash heaps. Mira stood before her assigned bike. It looked like a toaster oven welded to a jet engine. Rick, acting as her pit crew, was frantically duct-taping a loose stabilizer. "It'll hold," Rick promised, his hands shaking. "Just don't go above Mach 1. "If I don't go above Mach 1, I lose," Mira muttered, pulling on her helmet. Alex Wrench walked over, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. He looked at Mira's bike and frowned. "That regulator is shot. You hit the turbo. The whole thing explodes." "Trying to psych me out, Wrench?" "I'm trying to keep you from becoming a scorch mark," Alex growled. He reached over, ripped a wire out of her console, and twisted it around a bolt. "There. Bypass the regulator. It'll run hot, but it won't blow." Mira stared at him, surprised. "Why help me?" "I want to beat you fair and square," he said, turning back to his own machine, a hulking beast of matte black steel. "And I don't want to explain to your ghost why you were too stubborn to let a mechanic do his job." The starting gun was a cannon blast. 13 engines roared, and the pack surged forward into the canyon. Dust blinded Mira instantly. She relied on her instincts, the same instincts that helped her navigate a crowded dining room with 5 hot soups on a tray during a gravity fluctuation. She weaved, she ducked, she accelerated. The canyon was a nightmare of twisting turns and falling debris. Count Etienne was ahead, his bike gleaming gold, riding with arrogant smoothness. Sir Galahad was bashing competitors aside with his armored chassis. Mira pushed the throttle. The bike screamed, vibrating so hard her teeth rattled. She was gaining on the pack when her radar screamed a warning. Incoming. She didn't look. She just yanked the handlebars left. A laser blast scorched the air where her head had been a microsecond before. Above the canyon, a small, black combat drone was diving, locking onto her heat signature. "Rick," she screamed into her comms. "I've got a bogey. I see it." Rick's voice crackled. "I'm tracking the signal. Someone's controlling it manually from the spectator stands." The drone fired again. Mira slammed the brakes, letting the bike drift sideways. The blast hit the ground, kicking up a wall of molten slag. She couldn't outrun a drone on this heap of junk. She had to outfly it. Mira didn't drive like a racer. She drove like a maniac. She drove straight up the curved wall of a crashed starfreighter, defied gravity for 3 heart-stopping seconds, and then launched herself into the air. The drone couldn't track the erratic vertical movement fast enough. As Mira soared through the air, she saw Count Etienne below her, right in her landing path. "Sorry, Your Grace," she yelled. She landed just inches behind him. The shockwave of her landing destabilized his delicate anti-grav repulsion. The drone, trying to correct its aim, swooped low and slammed directly into the Count's rear turbine. With a high-pitched squeal of Gallic indignation, Count Etienne's bike spun out of control, crashing into a pile of radioactive tires. He was ejected safely into a mound of foam, part of the safety protocol, but his race was over. Target neutralized, Rick panted over the comms. "I found the operator in the stands, gave him a sedative injection. He's sleeping like a baby. No ID on who hired him, though." "Good job, brother," Mira breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs. But the race wasn't over. In the chaos, Jean-Paul, the smiling model, had drafted behind Alex Wrench and used a nitrous boost to surge across the finish line, flashing a winning smile to the hovering cameras. Alex came in second, looking furious. Mira crossed the line fourth, her bike disintegrating the moment she cut the power. "You're alive," Alex said, walking over to her. He sounded almost relieved. "Disappointed?" Mira asked, removing her helmet and shaking out her hair. "Surprised," Alex corrected. "You fly like a drunken bat. But nice move on the vertical loop." "Thanks, Wrench. Maybe next time you won't lose to a tube of toothpaste like Jean-Paul." Alex scowled, but there was a hint of a smirk on his lips. The prize for the winner of the first stage was a private weekend with the bride-to-be. Since Mira was both the bride and a contestant, the rules became murky, but the producers decided she had to spend the weekend with the winner, Jean-Paul, at his penthouse on the resort moon of Luminos. It was the longest 48 hours of Mira's life. Jean-Paul's penthouse was a temple of white leather and chrome. Everything was voice-activated. The food was molecular foam that tasted like pretension. "You see, Mira," Jean-Paul said, staring at his own reflection in a spoon. "Beauty is pain. But mostly, beauty is symmetry. Your nose, for example, it has character. We could fix that." "I like my nose," Mira said, stabbing a sphere of broccoli foam. "It smells nonsense from a mile away." "And your hands," he continued, reaching out to touch her calloused fingers. "These are workers' hands. Once we are married, you will never lift anything heavier than a diamond again." "What if I want to lift things?" Mira asked. "What if I want to fix things? Or punch things?" Jean-Paul laughed, a tinkling, empty sound. "Oh, you're funny. You will learn to relax. To be an ornament. It is a good life." Mira looked out the window at the stars. She thought of the rusty bolt, the adrenaline, the grease, and even Alex Wrench's grumpy face. This sterile perfection wasn't a prize. It was a coffin. She wasn't just fighting for her independence anymore. She was fighting to avoid being bored to death. The second trial took place on Mira's home world, the provincial planet Quiet Haven. It was a world of perpetual twilight, damp cobblestones, and hushed voices. The planet was dominated by two factions: the Silent Ones, a fanatical cult who believed noise was sin, and the Voiced, a cast of singers who held the cultural history of the planet. The producers, loving irony, set the finish line at the ancient chapel in the center of the old city. The starting point, the high cliffs, 10 miles away. The task, use magnetic wingsuits to glide from the cliffs, navigate the urban sprawl, and ring the bell at the chapel. "I hate this planet," Rick whispered as he adjusted Mira's harness. The wind whipped at them on the cliff edge. "It's creepy." "It's home," Mira said, checking her altimeter. "Sort of. I haven't been back since Dad left Mom." The 12 remaining suitors looked like colorful birds in their high-tech suits. Mira stood at the edge, number 13 painted on her back. "Try to land on the updrafts," Alex Wrench's voice came from her left. He was checking his own gear with methodical precision. "The thermal currents from the slums are stronger." "I know the currents, Wrench. I grew up here."
"Right.
"Just watch your six. The locals look restless." Alex was right. Below them, the city wasn't sleeping. Torches burned in the streets. The cult of the sacred silence was rioting, protesting the noise of the galactic games. "Go!" They jumped. The sensation of flight was exhilarating. The magnetic wings caught the planetary ley lines, and the suitors soared through the twilight. But as they descended toward the city, chaos erupted. Fireworks, or rather, anti-air flak cannons repurposed by the cult, burst into the sky. Evasive maneuvers. Sir Galahad shouted over the comms. The formation broke. Mira banked hard right, aiming for the darker alleyways of the dock district, hoping to slip under the radar. It was a mistake. A sudden thermal pocket collapsed, and she dropped like a stone. She fired her emergency thrusters, slowing her descent just enough to crash through a rotting awning and land in a pile of garbage bags in a narrow, dark alley. Groaning, Mira unclipped her wings. "Rick? I'm down."
Sector 4.
"Mira, get out of there." Rick's voice was panicked. "That's cult territory. They're hunting the participants." Shadows detached themselves from the walls. Men in gray robes, their mouths stitched shut, symbolically mostly, advanced on her with clubs. Mira grabbed a rusted pipe from the trash. "Look, boys, I'm having a really bad week. Don't make me do this." They charged. Mira swung, ducked, and kicked, using her bar brawl experience. But there were 6 of them. One grabbed her arm. Another raised a club. A massive wrench whistled through the air, striking the club wielder in the helmet. He went down instantly. Alex Wrench dropped from a fire escape, landing in a crouch. He stood up, cracking his knuckles. "She said she's having a bad week." Beside him landed Sir Galahad, his armor gleaming even in the gloom. He drew a stun sword. "A lady in distress. Have at thee, knaves." Within 2 minutes, the cultists were unconscious in a heap. "You followed me," Mira accused Alex, wiping dirt from her cheek. "I saw you drop," Alex shrugged, retrieving his wrench. "Figured you'd get into trouble. Can't marry you if you're a martyr." "And I," proclaimed Sir Galahad, "could not abandon a fellow competitor to such unchivalrous odds." "We need to move," Mira said. "The chapel is 2 miles east. But the main streets are blocked by the riots." "I know a shortcut," Mira said. "Through the sewers." "Sewers?" Galahad looked at his shining armor. "Oh dear. It's that or the mob," Alex said, already prying open a manhole cover. "After you, princess." They waded through the muck, fighting off aggressive sewer rats and dodging steam vents. Mira led them with confidence, navigating the labyrinth she used to play in as a child. Finally, they reached a maintenance hatch that led to the basement of a warehouse near the chapel. Inside, Rick had set up a forward operating base. He had gadgets spread out on a crate. "Thank the stars." Rick hugged Mira, ignoring the smell. "I've got stun grenades and smoke bombs prepared for the final sprint." As they caught their breath, Sir Galahad noticed a tattoo on Mira's wrist, exposed where her flight suit was torn. It was a small, stylized lark. "My lady," Galahad said, his voice trembling with awe. "That mark. You are of the voiced." Mira pulled her sleeve down quickly. "It was a long time ago. My mother was one. I have the training." "The voiced take a vow," Galahad recited solemnly, "to sing only for their true heart's companion, to bind their soul to one." "It's just an old superstition," Mira said, blushing. "To a knight of the Neo Order, vows are everything," Galahad said. He sheathed his sword. "I cannot compete against you. If you are voiced, you are sacred. And if I were to win by force, I would compel you to break your vow. I withdraw."
What? Galad? No.
"You're in third place," Mira cried. "Honor before glory," the knight bowed. "I shall hold the door against the mob while you run." Outside, the cultists were battering the warehouse doors. Galahad turned and marched toward the entrance, a one-man army ready to buy them time. "He's crazy," Alex muttered, but there was respect in his voice. "Come on. The chapel is across the square." They burst out the back exit. The square was a war zone. Smoke, screaming, fanatics throwing stones. The finish line, the chapel doors, was 100 yards away. "Run!" Alex yelled. They sprinted. Mira threw Rick smoke bombs, creating a path of gray fog. They were neck and neck. If Mira won, she was one step closer to freedom. If Alex won, a cultist lunged from the smoke, tackling Mira. She hit the ground hard. The wind knocked out of her. "No, you don't," Alex roared. He didn't keep running toward the finish line. He turned back, grabbed the cultist by the robe, and tossed him aside like a sack of flour. He grabbed Mira's hand.
Up.
"Move your legs." Ankle." Mira gasped. She'd twisted it in the fall. Alex didn't hesitate. He scooped her up, throwing her over his shoulder like a bag of tools.
Put me down, wrench.
"You have to finish." "Shut up." Alex grunted, charging through the mob, dodging rocks and bottles. He stomped up the steps of the chapel. At the threshold, he stopped. The judges were there, cameras rolling. "Put me down," Mira whispered. "If you cross with me, who wins?" "I do," Alex said, breathless. "Because I'm carrying the cargo." He stepped across the line. "Winner, Alex Wrench." The chime sounded. Alex collapsed to his knees, gently sliding Mira off his shoulder. They were both covered in sewer muck, bruises, and sweat. Mira looked at him, her chest heaving. "You came back for me. You could have just won." "I told you." Alex wiped his forehead, leaving a streak of grime. "I don't leave people behind. Besides, if I left you there, who would I argue with?" The medics swarmed them, but Mira felt a strange warmth that had nothing to do with the exertion. The transition to the third trial allowed for a brief respite. Since Alex had won the second stage, he had the right to choose the transport and destination for the interim period. He chose his home, the mining colony Ember. And he chose his transport, his own ship, the Old Nag. The Old Nag was an ugly, boxy freighter that smelled of ozone and stale coffee. As they lifted off from Quiet Haven, leaving the riots behind, Mira sat in the co-pilot seat, watching Alex's hands dance over the manual controls. "So," Mira said, watching the stars stretch into warp lines. "We're going to meet your family? Don't expect much," Alex warned, his voice tight. "Ember isn't a resort. It's a rock where people work until they break." "I've worked in a diner for 10 years, Alex. I know what work looks like." He glanced at her, and for the first time, his guarded expression softened. The arrogance of the other suitors, the madness of the challenges, it all felt far away in the quiet hum of the cockpit. "Just don't judge them," Alex said softly. "They're loud, they're dirty, but they're mine." "Drive the ship, Wrench," Mira said, putting her feet up on the dashboard. "I think I can handle a little dirt." As the ship plunged into the wormhole, Mira realized with a start that she wasn't dreading the destination. For the first time since the will reading, she wasn't looking for an escape route. She was just curious. But in the cargo hold, Rick was staring at an encrypted message on his datapad. It was from a contact in the underworld. Subject, Grimza. Identity, Silas Vale. Location, mobile. Rick swallowed hard. The game was getting dangerous. And his sister was starting to look at the mechanic with eyes that were far too soft for a fake marriage. The mining colony, Ember, was a stark contrast to the glitter of Glemuria. It was a world of soot, steam, and hard angles, located in the asteroid belt of a dying star. As the old nag touched down on a landing pad that was more rust than metal, Mira expected to feel repulsed. Instead, looking at the warm, yellow lights flickering in the habdomes, she felt a strange tug in her chest. "Home sweet hovel," Alex muttered, shutting down the engines. "We can stay at the cargo bay, if you don't want to deal with the noise. My sister's place is chaotic." "I thrive in chaos, Wrench," Mira said, unbuckling her harness. "Lead the way." They were greeted not by a delegation, but by a tackle. A 6-year-old girl with grease smudges on her cheeks launched herself at Alex's legs. "Uncle Alex, did you bring the parts? Did you win the money? Is this the princess?" Alex scooped the girl up, his grumpy demeanor dissolving instantly into a soft, genuine smile. Sophie breathed. "Yes, maybe, and no. This is Mira. She's trouble." "I'm a waitress," Mira corrected, extending a hand. "Which means I bring food." Sophie's eyes widened. "That's way better than a princess." The next 2 days were a revelation for Mira. She met Alex's sister, Martha, who ran the colony's life support systems with a soldering iron and a prayer. She met the boys, a group of burly miners who treated Alex like a local hero and Mira like a visiting queen, offering her their best moonshine and roasted algae chips. Mira sat on a crate, watching Alex fix a neighbor's heater while Sophie handed him tools. There was no pretense here.
No cameras, no algorithms.
Just people surviving together. She realized that the warmth she felt wasn't just the thermal vents, it was the community. It was something Cornelius Van Der Blesk's billions couldn't buy, and something her solitary life in the city had lacked. Late that night, Mira found Alex sitting on the roof of the habdome, looking up at the smog-choked stars. She sat beside him, their shoulders touching. "You're good with them," Alex said quietly, not looking at her. "I thought you'd hate it here." "It's real," Mira said. "Everything else has been plastic. This matters." She hesitated, then rested her head on his shoulder. "You're doing this for them, aren't you? The prize money." "Filters cost $3 million, Alex admitted, his voice rough. "The rest? I don't care about the rest. I just want Sophie to see a blue sky before she's 20. "We'll get those filters," Mira promised. The air between them shifted, charged with a sudden, static electricity. Alex turned to her, his eyes searching hers. The prickly banter was gone, replaced by a magnetic pull that terrified and thrilled her. He leaned in. Mira closed her eyes. "Mira, Alex. Emergency." Rick's voice shrieked from Myra's comlink, shattering the moment. Alex pulled back, looking frustrated enough to punch a hole in the roof. "What is it, Rick?" Mira groaned into her wrist calm. "I found it. The connection," Rick panted. "The woman who hired the drone operator?"
It's Kule de Village.
"You know, Dad's ex-girlfriend. But that's not the big news. I cross-referenced the trial names." Mira frowned. "The trial names?" "Yes. Rusty Bolt, Quiet Haven, Golden Chip, Green Hell. They aren't random. They're an anagram cipher Dad used in his journals. They spell out coordinates and a name." "What name?" "Silas Vale," Rick said grimly. "That's Grimza's real name. The Lone Shark. He's not just a thug, he's a ghost from Dad's past. And he's coming to the next trial." The third trial took place on the Golden Chip, a casino satellite orbiting a neutral gas giant. It was a den of vice, neon, and desperation. The challenge: each contestant was given 1 million credits. They had 12 hours to either lose it all or double it. The remaining suitors hit the tables. Lars, a professional gambler with cybernetic eyes, went straight for the high-stakes poker room. Countless others went to roulette. Mira, however, had a different plan. She stood at the bar with Alex, watching the pit boss. "We aren't playing, are we?" Alex sighed, adjusting the uncomfortable tuxedo he had been forced to wear. "Nope," Mira whispered. "Rick traced Silas Vale's financial data to this station. The manager, Don Vito, keeps a physical ledger in his private safe. If we get that ledger, we have leverage."
We.
Alex raised an eyebrow. "I'm a mechanic, not a cat burglar. You fixed a regulator at Mach 1 wrench. A ventilation shaft is child's play." 30 minutes later, Alex was squeezed into a chrome duct, cursing softly. "I hate this. I look like a penguin in a pipe. You are a crazy squirrel, Mira." "Less complaining, more crawling," Mira whispered from behind him. Left at the junction. They dropped into Don Vito's office like two very ungraceful spiders. Mira went straight for the desk. She used a decryption dongle Rick had prepared to bypass the maglock. "Got it," she hissed, pulling out a heavy, leather-bound book. "So touching," a deep voice rumbled. The chair spun around. Don Vito, a large man petting a small, robotic iguana, smiled at them. Two security droids stepped out of the shadows, blasters raised. "The daughter of Cornelius," Vito mused. "And her mechanic. Stealing from me? Bad for your health." Mira didn't flinch. She slammed the book on the desk. "Actually, Don Vito, I'm saving your business. This book contains records of your dealings with Silas Vale. You know, the guy who is currently under investigation by the Intergalactic Tax Agency? If they find this, you go to prison. If I keep this, Silas goes down, and you get to claim you were a cooperating witness." Vito paused. He looked at the droids, then at the book. "Vale is a leech. He owes me money, too." "Give me his location and confirm his identity," Mira negotiated. "And I forget I ever saw your other accounts." Vito grinned, showing gold teeth. "You have your father's gall."
Deal.
"Silas is currently operating out of the asteroid belt, but his proxy is here, watching the games." While Mira was conducting corporate espionage, Lars had successfully doubled his money by counting cards with his cyber eyes. He was declared the winner of the stage. "The winner is Lars," the announcer boomed. And for the next leg of the journey, he chooses his destination, the archive planet Biblios. Biblios was a planet-sized library, a silent world of towering paper spires and data canyons. It was also the perfect place for an ambush. Rick arrived ahead of the main party with his team, a motley crew consisting of a hacker who is allergic to electricity, a disgraced demolition expert, and Aunt Sarah, who was there to serve subpoenas. "Listen," Rick told Mira and Lars in the safe house, a hollowed-out encyclopedia volume. "Our intel says Silas hired the butcher to take you both out here. He wants the inheritance to default to the next in line, who he has likely bribed. So we fight?" Lars asked, shuffling a deck of razor cards. "No," Mira said, eyes gleaming. "We put on a show." When the mercenary, the butcher, arrived at their location, a suspended bridge between two fiction towers, he found Mira and Lars arguing near an aero taxi. Suddenly, the taxi exploded. A massive fireball consumed the bridge. Debris rained down into the abyss. The butcher nodded, satisfied, and messaged his employers. 2 hours later, a sleek yacht landed at the crash site. Out stepped Mr. Zlobin, a corporate rival of Cornelius, and Cruella, the ex-girlfriend. They walked to the edge, peering at the scorched metal. Finally, Cruella sneered. "The brat is gone. Now we claim the assets." "Not so fast," a voice echoed. Floodlights snapped on. Mira and Lars stood on a higher platform, perfectly alive. The explosion had been a holographic projection mixed with Rick smoke bombs. "You're dead," Zlobin shrieked. "Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated," Mira quipped. Zlobin reached for his weapon, but a shimmering blue force field sprang up around them. Aunt Sarah stepped out from behind a stack of law books. "Entrapment, conspiracy to commit murder, and terrible fashion sense," Sarah listed, tapping her datapad. "The Galactic Sheriff is on his way." Rick and his team shook down the villains, literally holding Zlobin upside down until he confessed the location of the ultimate mastermind. "It's Silas." Zlobin wept. "He's at the Green Hell."
The old lab.
"He's looking for the symbiote." The fourth trial was hastily relocated to Green Hell, a jungle planet that was 90% carnivorous flora and 10% aggressive fauna. The remaining contestants, Mira, Alex, Lars, nursing a fake limp to sell the story, and Jean-Paul, trekked through the steaming undergrowth. They were guided by Dr. Livingstone, a man who wore a pith helmet and spoke to ferns. "Beware the ostriches," Livingstone whispered, eyes wide. "They are not like the birds of Earth. They are organized." As they camped that night, Mira pieced together the final part of the puzzle. "Dr. Livingstone," she asked by the fire. 50 years ago, a scientist vanished here. Was his name Silas Vale?" Livingstone nodded solemnly. "He sought the Ancient Ones, parasitic organisms that grant eternal life but consume the host's morality. He found one. It took him. He isn't a man anymore, my dear. He is a vessel. The symbiote," Mira realized. "That's why he needs Dad's money. To build an army for the parasite." Suddenly, the jungle fell silent. Then a low drumming sound began. Thump, thump, thump. "Ostriches!" Livingstone screamed. They burst from the foliage, 6-foot-tall mutant birds with razor claws and glowing red eyes. The camp erupted into chaos. Hans, the jovial pastry chef who had somehow survived this far, grabbed a frying pan to defend the food supplies. "Stay back, you oversized chickens." A massive ostrich, the alpha, swiped. Hans fell, the pan clattering away. It was a tragic, sudden end to the group's heart. Lars tried to throw cards, but a kick sent him flying into a tree, breaking his leg for real this time. Jean-Paul, seeing the feathers and blood, shrieked at a pitch only dogs could hear and sprinted into the jungle, abandoning the group. "They're closing in," Alex yelled, swinging a burning log to keep them back. Mira looked at the alpha male. Beak. She didn't feel fear. She felt a strange buzzing in her head. The intuition she used to balance trays, to fly the bike, to pick the safe, it surged. She locked eyes with the bird. "Hunger," she heard in her mind. "Intruders." No, Mira projected back, focusing all her will. Not enemies. Providers. She envisioned the cargo hold of their ship, filled with protein bars and grain. She pushed the image into the bird's mind.
Food.
"If you leave us." Beak paused. He cocked his head, looking at Mira. The red glow in his eyes dimmed. He squawked a command, and the pack retreated, melting back into the shadows. Alex stared at her, slack-jawed. "Did you just negotiate with a murder bird?" "I think I promised them our lunch," Mira said, trembling as the adrenaline faded. With Hans dead, Jean-Paul missing, later found shivering in a tree, and Lars incapacitated, the field was thinned. Mira, as the bride/host/13th suitor, had to choose the finalists for the last confrontation. She looked at Alex. He was bleeding, covered in mud, and holding a log like Excalibur. "I choose Alex Wrench," she said softly. That night, aboard the old nag as they prepared to leave orbit, the tension finally broke. "You could have died," Alex said, pacing the small cabin. "So could you," Mira countered. "I can't lose you, Mira," Alex confessed, stopping in front of her. "I don't care about the money. I don't care about the game. I can't." "Then don't," Mira whispered. Tears pricked her eyes. "I love you, you grumpy mechanic." They kissed, and it was better than any algorithm could have predicted. They spent the night watching the stars blur through the porthole, holding onto each other as the ship hurtled toward the final battle. The finale was set on the asteroid Shelter, a grim rock that Silas Vale, Grimza, had turned into a fortress. It wasn't a wedding venue. It was a factory where debtors were turned into mindless drone soldiers by the symbiote spores. The wedding was a farce. Silas stood at the altar, a withered man with black veins pulsing under his skin. He didn't want Mira to marry. He wanted her DNA to unlock Cornelius's biometric vault. "Welcome, daughter," Silas rasped. His voice sounded like dry leaves skittering on concrete. "I object," Mira yelled, kicking open the doors. Behind her stood Alex, Rick, Aunt Sarah, the surviving suitors, and a very angry Dr. Livingstone riding a tamed mutant ostrich. "Attack!" Rick shouted. It was mayhem. Rick's team used homemade smoke bombs and marbles, a classic slapstick trap that worked surprisingly well against zombies. Alex wielded a heavy wrench, dismantling droid guards with surgical precision. Mira fought her way up the dais, dodging Silas's tentacle-like shadow strikes. "You are weak," Silas roared, the symbiote taking control. "I am eternal." "You're just a parasite with a bad credit score," Mira shouted. She and Rick flanked him. Silas lunged at Mira, but she slid under his guard, attaching a high-voltage cable from the old nag, which Alex had rigged, to Silas's metal exoskeleton. "Alex now," she screamed. Alex slammed the power switch. A massive arc of blue electricity surged through Silas. The symbiote shrieked, a sound that shattered glass, and was ejected from Silas's body, dissolving into sludge on the floor.
Silas Valley collapsed.
When he opened his eyes, the black veins were gone. He looked around, confused. "Where am I? Did I miss the bingo night?" The old man had no memory of the last 50 years. He just wanted an aspirin. The dust settled. The galactic sheriff arrived to clean up. The inheritance was unlocked. Mira stood before the cameras, holding the microphone. The world waited for her to choose her husband. "I entered this contest to marry my independence," Mira announced. "To prove I didn't need anyone." She looked at Rick, who was high-fiving Dr. Livingstone. She looked at Aunt Sarah, counting her billable hours. And she looked at Alex, who was wiping symbiote goo off his boots. "But I found out that being independent doesn't mean being alone." She walked over to Alex and grabbed his collar. "I choose him. The mechanic. The one who fixes things." "I'm expensive," Alex grinned, wrapping his arms around her. "I'm rich," Mira retorted. "I can afford you." Rick watched them kiss, shaking his head. "I lost my best mechanic," he grumbled to the camera. Then he smiled, tears in his eyes. "But I got a brother. I'll be back for dinner." Epilogue. 2 years later. The mining colony Ember had new atmospheric filters. The sky was a piercing, beautiful blue. Mira sat on the porch of a house that was actually a renovated cargo container, but with very nice curtains. She was watching twin toddlers, a boy and a girl, chase a robotic cat that looked suspiciously like one of Cornelius's old pets. Alex came out, wiping his hands on a rag, and kissed the top of her head. "Rick's incoming. He says he brought steaks." "Vegetarian steaks?" Mira asked. "He says maybe." A sleek ship, the old Nag 2, roared overhead, performing a totally unnecessary barrel roll before landing. Mira leaned back, closing her eyes. She had the money, she had the freedom, but most importantly, she had the noise, the chaos, and the love. The 13th suitor had won it all.